Thank you for joining us today at the webinar hosted by North University College and jointly with GEANT, with the presentation by Francois Mouton, who's Associate Professor in Cybersecurity at North University College. The theme that we'll cover is social engineering, in particular how the new work from home concept has impacted the world. A little introduction, first of all, about GEANT. GEANT is the leading collaboration on network and related infrastructure and service and research and education. I'm Rosanna Norman, Communications Officer for GEANT. This presentation, this webinar, is part of the Cybersecurity Month initiative, which is a European-wide initiative that focuses on the importance of information security and the simple steps that can be taken to protect users' personal, financial, and professional data. So the main objective of this campaign is to create awareness, change behavior, and provide users with information on how to protect themselves and their organizations online. This campaign has given us the inspiration to launch our own campaign in collaboration with other national research and education networks within the GEANT community. And the campaign that we have entitled, with a small specific campaign that we have entitled, Become a Cyber Hero. And this campaign, in fact, aims to encourage end users to arm themselves against digital threats and feel empowered to protect themselves, their data, and their organization. This will run through the whole month of October, which is in fact Cybersecurity Month, and will be dedicated to specific themes within cybersecurity on a weekly by weekly basis. Week 1 will be dedicated to social engineering, week 2 to phishing, week 3 to ransomware, and week 4 to password security. We will be trying to raise awareness by publishing a series of articles, blogs, interviews, videos, and tips on social media and via the other channels that we use, which is a Connect newsletter. And now I think it's time for Francois to introduce his, talk about his research. A little admin information, first of all. If you have any questions, please include them in the Q&A session of this tool. Otherwise, you could wait until the end of the presentation to ask them directly, to ask Francois directly. In the meanwhile, we have dedicated, in fact, around half an hour for that. So I say that without further ado, I'll pass the baton to Francois. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the introduction, Rosanna. So what I'm going to be doing is today I'm going to be discussing social engineering and the work from home concept. So in this day and age, it's a lot of things have changed, and the society as a whole is significantly different. I mean, it's no longer a concept where people actually do want to work from home. About a year ago, 2 years ago, it was a novel thing to work from home. People want to do it. They thought about it as a free holiday that they could take. And society has significantly changed in the past couple of months now. We have gone from a society where people actually crave social interaction. We've noticed we aren't beings who can actually manage and live on our own, in a sense. It sounds very odd, but it's quite interesting. So first of all, who am I? Francois Mouton. I'm working at North University College, and the reason for this presentation is October, the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, is something that is really dear and close to me. It's a month where I can spend almost every other day promoting awareness, getting people encouraged to talk about cybersecurity, finding what's going on and how, most importantly, protect themselves. So the home office environment we've gone into it's a mentally taxing thing. It's something we're not actually used to. I mean, when I was working with John and them, most of them are also in working from home office. I mean, even university where I'm working now, a lot of our classes have moved to an online environment, which there's both pros and cons to it. But honestly, as an educator, it has become such a difficult task. It is really difficult to present classes. I mean, similar on this webinar, I can't just look people in the eye and ensure I maintain eye contact. I mean, it's one of the most difficult things when you present to a camera is to actually look at the camera and make sure you maintain eye contact with the audience. So it's one of those things I am getting better at, but it's one of the things we as a society need to learn. It's a really mentally taxing thing. So how did the original workplace look? This is my workplace at Norwich. We have got a nice open plan office, and it really works. I mean, if you want to have a discussion with someone, they're immediately right next to you, and it's a good way to bounce ideas off. And especially when you're preparing slides for students, it's, will this work? Which image is better? And so forth. How are we going to go about doing it? Constant communication with other people allows you to create better content. Currently, we're sitting in isolation, in silos. A lot of people's home office looks like this. Your closest companion is your washing machine that's making a noise right next to you. And it's really difficult. There's no more a thing where you can just go to talk to someone else or ask someone, let's go for a coffee, where you can exchange ideas. It has become a really much more difficult environment. So previously, everyone thought home office is a good thing. It's a way to escape from work. It's a way to get away from office politics. It's a way that you can almost avoid work in a sense. But a lot of people have been home officing for such a long time, where if you're not doing work for a month, then it kind of starts noticing. And home office, for me personally, it's become a way more productive environment. Actually, it gives me time to focus on research, but I ensure I get daily contact with other people again. So it's a massive challenge, but currently, I mean, I've got the choice whether to work from the office or whether to work from home. And quite frankly, I actually prefer working from the office because I can bounce ideas of other people. It just makes life easier. And government, especially in Norway, is actually advising that you do take home office once or twice in a week if you're not required at the office, to which a lot of people are saying they actually prefer being at the office. It's a way for you to get away from things at home. If your children is at home, it's really difficult to concentrate on your work whilst your children are there. It's actually more difficult for people to concentrate when they're at the home to focus on work. Similarly for students, it's something that I've picked up. A lot of students prefer to actually come to campus and do their work because it's an environment where they can actually focus on what they're doing. So why am I discussing this, and why am I explaining the societal norm? So starting in March, media and news outlets gave us really mixed information on what's going on. We either had Homer Simpson on the left-hand side that says the end is nigh, the end is near, and we're all going to die, and massive crisis. Where on the other side, media told us, keep calm, wash your hands, everything will be okay. And there was such a mixed array of messaging. I mean, even to this day, we don't really know how bad the situation is. We all know it is really bad, but we don't know to what extent, and it's a really emotionally taxing thing. So currently we're sitting in, we don't really know what's the truth. Yes, there's stats out there. So I know recently in this week, the UK realized they were misreporting their COVID-19 stats by a couple of thousands. I know it was quite a significant number. And yes, that is wrong. And we don't know what to trust. People are very unsure. In the US, they've even got a bigger crisis where they're moving into elections now, and it's people are really stressed. And especially when you're stressed, you need to communicate with other people. But as soon as you want to communicate to other people, people tell you, don't engage with me. I don't want to get corona. Wear a face mask. All of this. And work from home, don't engage with people, and it's a vicious cycle that just goes on and on and on and on. And the only person you can talk to is yourself. And we all know, if you're sitting and wondering what the situation is, you always think the absolute worst. So this has led to an environment where everyone is really stressed. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what the truth is, and it is difficult for society to function. So psychological impact of stress. And a lot of you, I'm pretty sure if I run a poll in this, people will tell me they've had sleepless nights. People are getting headaches. A massive problem is depression. There's a lot of people in society who really feed off other people. So those people really, really struggle when they don't have social engagement. It's become an absolute problem for these people. Even the introverts who said they would absolutely love being at home, 2 to 3 weeks into the thing, we've gotten to the point 2 to 3 weeks in that the problem is people cannot cope anymore. They want to get back into the office. It's really not a great thing to be in an isolation where it's really difficult. You have no idea what's going on. So we don't know what's going on. It's really difficult. So the impact of stress. We're getting to a point where the more stressed you are, the significant impact on cognitive functioning you have. There's so many psychological studies out there that as soon as people are under stress, that they really struggle to reason. It's something that people do struggle with. It's a known thing. I did personal research on this. When people get into the office and they had a fight at home, or they were in a near car crash and stuff, and you give them a very basic mathematical task, people really, really struggle to do even that. And all of this creates a heightened sense of emotion. And as soon as you've got a heightened sense of emotion, as soon as you're starting to argue with people and you're angry at people, what happens? You can no longer make informed decisions, and that's why arguments tend to spiral out of control. We get to a point where the argument just goes on and on and on, and it's a massive fight at the end of the day. And why is this important? I mean, we said we're going to talk about social engineering and security and cybersecurity, and cybersecurity, we haven't even touched that point. So the heightened sense of emotion, that's the main thing that social engineers tend to prey on. Social engineering is basically, it's the manipulation of people because people trust. I mean, I can ask everyone here, there's not a single person in this room who does not have a bank account. Society requires you to have a bank account. But then I ask people, why do you have a bank account? And the reasons I've gotten is because that's what's expected of me. It's an easy way to store my money. That's just how society works. And then I ask them, but do you trust the bank? And they're like, yeah, but they're not always sure. And then the end result is society trusts. You trust that the bank will not lose your money. There's zero guarantee that if the bank goes bankrupt, then that you'll get any of the money. There's been many instances in history where banks have gone bankrupt and people have lost all of their life savings. So it's not always such a fail-safe system. You cannot always trust that society will work. So the current attack trends that I saw, and this is a lot of stuff related to on how the coronavirus worked, is, and these attacks actually are active, and a lot of these attacks hit media in the past 5-6 months ago. And people say they won't fall prey to these attacks. So to anyone sitting here thinking they won't fall prey to social engineering attacks, the latest Twitter hack was a social engineering attack. I've done social engineering assessments at cybersecurity conferences where I had 2/3 of the conference clicking on the link. It is typically the people you think that will never fall prey to these type of attacks that is the easiest of targets on these attacks. So the very first attack, phishing scams. There's been an absolutely massive increase. Almost every other government out there had some or other plan that in order to reimburse their citizens. And this is in the US, this is what the phishing scam was. You received an SMS, your crisis hotline claim has been pre-approved, and you just have to navigate there to go. And people put in their full banking details there, logged into their bank accounts, and attackers were able to steal a significant amount of money from that. So these things happen, and people do fall prey. So the thing that people need to note on that, there's a lot of people in society that are really struggling. Everybody, unfortunately, has their price. And if you offer someone a significant amount of money that they will never see in their life, they do tend to trust and they do tend to click on the links. This is something which does work, even though you say it will never work on you, it does. I personally have fallen prey to social engineering attacks. It's not something I can say that will never work. Especially, take the example, let's say you're waiting for a package, some postal mail, and you get a message whilst you're waiting for the post. And says, just click here to see if the package has arrived. It's called a spear phishing attack at that point because they've got some additional information on you. And because you're not thinking clearly and you are waiting and you're expecting such a message, you are going to turn and click. Society has moved to this whole instant gratification thing where we are on the point of instant coffee, instant noodles, everything is instant quickly. People just tend to click on links. We no longer read emails properly. Almost a subset of phishing attacks is all the fake URLs that is appearing. Immediately when the corona crisis hit, all of these corona-crisis.com were all fake and malicious URLs that was registered. I mean, the cyber attackers saw this as an easy way to make money. They registered all these links. So all of these look like really, really good links. But unfortunately, they were all registered by malicious organizations. So you can no longer teach people, say, to detect phishing emails, just make sure the link is correct. I mean, coronadetection.com or coronadatabase.com, those look like perfectly valid URLs. It's a thing we're not going to get around. Then physical attacks. A lot of governments out there said they're going to come to your home, do corona testing because people shouldn't leave homes. This was a massive issue in South Africa because people came into homes and actually caused burglaries to happen. So how do we tell people to be vigilant against these attacks? People want to be safe. So people also inherently trust the government. I mean, now that I'm in Norway, it's a whole different culture. And in Norway, the government only recommends that you are wearing a mask on public transport, and everyone complies. It's a very different concept on how society actually works in different settings. So how do you always know what is true, who to trust, what to do about it. There's also the other side of the story where people love to donate money and love to support charitable causes. There were so many causes out there during the COVID crisis where the money went to the wrong people. People want to donate, donation pages were set up, and people donated money to causes that the money went nowhere. Unfortunately, it's a problem we need to be aware of. And then one of my biggest gripes is people always push their own personal agendas. The image I have here is the person who stocked up on all the face masks and anti-bac, and he was actually placed under ban to not be able to sell the things. The other part is where governments use scientists, and scientists in quote, to push their drug of choice. I mean, pharmacies and the vendors of these drugs said ibuprofen is the way to go. We also had other companies that said hydroxychloroquine is also the way to go, the malaria drug. I mean, these were things 5-6 months ago, and does anyone know what happened to the story? It's a thing where it died a silent death. There was a mass shortage on hydroxychloroquine, and people just forget about it. So think about it. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone in the room knows about these things, but no one knows what the end result is. Misinformation. This is an ongoing problem, and my personal projection is this is the thing that is going to cause the most problems in the few coming years. Fake news is something that we cannot get away from. It needs to be something that's recognized, and active research needs to go into this area. We're getting to a point where people can make fake videos, make people speak and put voices and do voiceovers on it, to a point where it's really difficult to determine, did this person actually say it? Is this the truth? What's going on? I mean, this is a very basic image where they said that the Italian Prime Minister is crying while he addressed the media. But, I mean, that is very clearly an old thing. It's the Brazilian president. So another good example is they were showing that people were dying on the street. And that picture looks shocking, but that was actually an art project. So how do we know what is the actual truth? We don't. It's people need to be vigilant. I'm actually very glad that the social media outlets like Twitter and Facebook actually started putting warnings on posts. And there was massive backlash about the warnings eventually. But they started putting warnings on posts that before you share, please verify whether the information is safe and whether the information is correct. So, and it's the thing, everyone likes a story. Malicious websites, there were a dime a dozen. There were so many malicious websites because when the Corona crisis hit, everyone wanted to do a stats page, and stats page was generic programs they use for stats, and it was really easy to copy these things. And lastly, the thing I really need to mention, and I have received emails on this when I'm hosting this webinar, why are we using Zoom? And this is something that's very dear to me as well, and I actually want to address it on the slide. I'm also doing research into security vulnerabilities on Zoom and how are they being addressed. And the part of the reason for my research is Zoom is actually what NORAF is using for teaching. And yes, it is 100% true that Zoom has had the most identified security vulnerabilities within the past year. 100% true factual information. The part that people miss, it is also 100% true and factual that Zoom was the quickest to respond to all the reported security vulnerabilities and addressed and fixed them. On average, the turnaround time for Zoom to fix their security vulnerabilities was between 24 to 48 hours. So as long as you kept your Zoom updated, it wasn't such a big problem. All of the exploits that was part on the Zoom thing, it was mostly about people joining meetings and putting up images or taking over the video and so forth. And yes, it was bad things, but it was also partially people being new to Zoom, misconfiguring their meetings, not setting up the correct settings or the correct privacy settings on the meetings. I mean, this is 100% set up webinar, and none of the participants can actually share the video unless I explicitly give them permission. I also don't run into any issues where you can unmute yourself without requesting permission to do it. So if the Zoom webinars that the people had the Zoom bombings on were correctly set up and correctly used on the software, all those problems could have been averted. So why did Zoom get so many disclosed security vulnerabilities? At the time, it was the most used software. It had the most media attention. And why would media write about software that no one knows about or gets no attention? People write about stuff that makes the best story. People write about software that people are using. I mean, it's the same. For many years, people thought Windows was the only platform that had viruses developed for it or malware developed for it, which was not really the truth. It was just the most used platform. No one really reported viruses on Unix and on Mac OS at that time because it didn't get any media attention. So it's all about how society works and how society reports things. We need to be aware that the media controls the way you think, and it has a massive impact on how you observe life. And that transitions into understanding how the human thinks and why we do things. So I'm going to now transition onto how your children manipulate you, how you get people to listen to you. What is the social compliance principles? So all the compliance principles that I'm going to be discussing have been proposed by Richard Cialdini in the 1980s. These are tried and tested principles. And these are the exact same principles that they would teach you in a marketing course, actually. So how do you get people to like you? Incidental similarity. If I draw on the very small things that makes us similar, me talking about research, a lot of the people in the webinar work with NRENs. They work with IT equipment. They are system admins or network admins or researchers. We all work on IT infrastructure on a daily basis. It's as soon as I talk to you about an IT product or an IT project, it's something that will most likely excite you and you will be passionate to start talking about it. It's the same as if someone comes up to me and talks about social engineering. I'll be extremely passionate and talk about it. But if someone asks me about gardening, it's a topic that I don't know much about. It's immediately, there's no link between me and the other person. A good way of incidental similarity is when you want to tailgate into buildings is the smoking section. You stand in the smoking area and start smoking with the people, and you both have in common trait that you are both smokers, and you strike up a discussion. And these things it spirals out of control. People inherently trust. To this day, whenever I've done a social engineering penetration test, no one has questioned why I'm just tailgating in behind them. No one has said, please don't enter with me. It is unfortunately the problem that we've gotten into. So another thing is commitment to consistency, and this is the foot in the door technique. So I've got the greatest example here. If you send your child into the store to buy an ice cream and you give them 10 krona or 10 rands or $10 or 10 euro, a 10 euro for an ice cream, that's ridiculously expensive though. But let's say you give them 10 kroner to go into the store and buy an ice cream cone. You've committed at that point to buy an ice cream cone. So the child goes in, comes back out and says, the ice cream cone now costs 15 kroner. It is very, very difficult for you as a parent to then deny your child to buy the ice cream. You've already committed to doing something. You will always fulfill the request and add the additional money onto it. It's a thing. There's people in this room, you can think about examples of how your children manipulate you. It's a really cool concept, and unfortunately after this session you're going to be a lot more aware about how your children emotionally play on you and get you to do things that you shouldn't actually be doing. You also get the Lowball Procedure, and this is something where it works. It's a technique when you do a car sale. This is something that I can give you a great example. When I bought a car in Norway, I didn't actually know that you have to pay additional taxes on top of the price of the car. But it's like a road tax to register the car. It's not something that is common in South Africa. So I went to the car dealership. I said, cool, I would like this car for, let's say, 200,000 kroner, to just give an amount. And they were like, cool. And I at that point, I was committed to buying the car. And then they said, well, you do know that it's another 10,000 kroner to actually register the car and the taxes on it and so forth. And I'm like, I didn't really budget for this, but I really like this car, so you just do it. It's the same way people do add-ons on cars. That's why the person gets you to commit to buying the car, and then up to 10 or 15% extra on the asking price. People normally tend to add better rims, better tires, adding the sat-nav navigation system on the vehicle. It's something we all do. It's a very standard salesman technique. It's also scarcity principle. People want stuff that they cannot have. It's part of life. It's when people are in relationships, everybody else wants to date them. But as soon as you're not in a relationship, you're no longer a desirable partner. It's the playing hard to get principle. Unfortunately, it's part of life. It's how society works. And the deadline technique. And this is something that I've seen way too often in society. Black Friday is coming up, end of November. And I know there's a lot of people looking forward to it. And just for that day, the specific new Google product or Apple product will go on sale, and people jump up at the opportunity to buy it. Not because you need the product, just because it's on sale. People don't, and it's very difficult for you to reason that 50% off doesn't mean it's such a massive bargain at that point. People then tend to overbuy and buy things that they do not need. So a lot of websites have gone in, and most of the online marketplaces, every day or every other day, they make offers about, for this 1 hour only, you get 50% off across all departments. It's also how all the airlines, I know in South Africa, the airlines just opened again for international travel. And they said for the next 12 hours or next 24 hours, you get 30 or 40% off flights. And people jumped at the opportunity. And people bought flights to countries where there's actually still travel bans in place in the hope that they might be able to travel. People buy things just because it goes on sale. I think every one of you have stories of this, and you've bought stuff that you've never used. I've seen this way too often. Every other person has some other tool in their toolbox that they bought for that one task, which they said, the item's on sale now, I need it, I will use it so often, and then end up never ever using it. So we also have the that's not all technique. It also goes back into sales and how shopping works. So it's a study that was done in 1986, 1987, around there, where it was done in the US because it relates to how bake sales work in that country, where they used a bake sale, and what they did is they sold cupcakes and chocolate chip cookies. These are easy to relate items and easy to understand. So what they did is they sold cupcakes for, let's say, $1, and then chocolate chip cookies for 25 cents for each cookie. So in order to be able to buy one cupcake and 2 chocolate chip cookies, you had to spend $1.50. And I just want to get the stats because I have that actually on the side. So in order for people to comply to doing that process, they only had about 40% compliance. The very next day, they said, what you can do is if you buy a cupcake for $1.50, you get 2 free chocolate chip cookies. It is exactly the same concept, exactly the same amount of food, exactly the same price, but just because it's now an added benefit and you feel like you're getting something for free, the compliance rate went up to 75%. People love it when they get stuff for free, even if it is actually a more expensive item at that point in time. So it's how society works. We also have another technique called the door in the face technique. And this is something that I always tell my students in class. If you have a really bad exam and you end up failing the exam and you have to tell your parents or your partner or your siblings, always make an absolutely ridiculous claim and saying you failed your entire year. And then people will be like, what? That is really, really terrible. And you're like, oh no, just joking. I actually only failed this one subject, but I passed all the other ones. And then they're like, geez, that was actually not that bad. I mean, they only failed one subject. It's not that great, but they didn't at least fail everything like they initially claimed. It's the same as on this example, we've got selling cookies. You go to a person, please buy 10 boxes of cookies, and they're like, geez, it's ridiculous. And then they immediately say no, and then you just drop down the request to maybe just buy 1 bag of cookies. And then people are like, it's not such a bad thing. I don't want to buy 10, but 1 bag of cookies will work. It's lovely examples, and I especially love it. And that's why online teaching is really terrible, because I can't see the expression of people's faces, especially on Zoom, where people start realizing how they've fallen prey to these attacks. And social validation is just one of these things that we have all fallen prey to. People tend to stand in queues, not because they know why there's a queue, just because it's the right thing and everyone else is doing it. At research conferences, I've seen this so many times, because a research conference is normally a big assortment of people who typically don't know each other, but everyone wants to conform to what is correct. So if you've got 2 registration desks, one being fake and one being real, you can easily form a queue at the fake registration desk. Just because people think that we should be queuing for this, they are queuing for it. And it's part of society. I mean, standing in a queue is not a wrong thing. It's also the reason why social distancing in several countries was such a successful thing. I mean, in Norway, it worked really well. They started putting stickers on the ground and saying, say, 1 meter apart, and people started acting to it, and everybody else saw that other people were acting to it. And you do not want to be that one person who does not comply to society. And people started doing it and started keeping a distance. It worked really, really, really well. So the last social compliance principle, and I always keep this for the end because it's something that is more often than not absolutely abused. People tend to comply to authoritative figures. So, and the example I always use in a class environment is, at the start of a year, I will walk into a different class that is not my class and just be properly dressed, wear a tie, wear a formal shirt, or wear a blazer. And then I would ask everyone in class, I'll say the other lecturer sent me here, can everyone just please stand up? And people will stand, and then I'm like, put up your left hand, put up your right hand. Then that whole joke about waving all about. And then everyone does it because I'm standing in front of class. And for some reason, people think I have authority to give them commands at that point in time. I've seen really, really bad examples of this as well, where just because your boss is sending you an email late at night and saying, I really have this financial problem and transfer money to so-and-so account, people do not want to upset their boss and inherently comply to his request. And that is how a lot of the financial losses occur in organizations. So how do we solve this problem? And there is no easy solution. I cannot apply the human patch 2.0. There is no way to get to a point where I can tell everyone, after this lecture, you'll be more aware of social engineering and you'll just be vigilant against it, because that is an absolute lie. I cannot do that. So a lot of you have heard about social engineering. Hopefully most of you have read the blog, and that's why you are here. So prior to reading the blog, you were either unconsciously incompetent, where you didn't know about it. You don't know that you don't know about it. After the blog, you were most likely consciously incompetent. So you know social engineering is a thing. You don't know how to protect yourself against it. And you decided, well, you're aware of it. What can I do about it? Let's attend the webinar. And then you become consciously competent. Trust me, tomorrow when you get to the office, you're going to be like, why did this person say this? What is my child doing? What are they trying to gain from this call? It's a normal human reaction. You become a lot more vigilant about why people request things and how things are being requested. And then after a few months later, after you've attended other social engineering talks or read up about it more, you go into a stage of unconsciously competent, where you no longer have to worry or wonder why someone sent you an email. You will unconsciously start detecting social engineering attacks and be a much better person and more vigilant against these attacks in the future. Unfortunately, this entire process takes a significant amount of time. So what I've gone here is, for everyone who is in home office, some practical security guidelines that you can use, stuff that you can apply every day. This talk is always aimed for you as an individual, but I want you to be able to share these techniques with other people who are not IT savvy. I never want to give out techniques that only the best IT security professionals can do, because at that point it becomes irrelevant, because people are like, these techniques are way too complex for what I can do, and people tend to not do it. So the first one of these 5 techniques is updating your operating system and the software used daily. It is such an easy process. Windows asks you, please update. All you need to do is just click yes, continue installing the updates. I know a lot of people in the chat will tell me some Windows updates break, some things do cause problems. Typically, by the time there's a pop-up, most of the issues have been resolved. It's only when you are on the bleeding edge of updates, where you update every hour, that you really run into issues. Issues on updates is typically quite quickly found, and by the time it has hit media and news outlets, the issue has already been resolved at that point in time. So keeping your system up to date is not something that's actually going to break your system. Exactly opposite to contrary belief. Then the software used, please keep that updated. The biggest way that phishing scams get in is through Adobe Acrobat Reader that people don't keep up to date. And I've seen this in many companies where I've done pen tests. People install Adobe Reader when they first get the machine, because they need to open a PDF, and no one ever thinks about keeping it up to date, because every version of Adobe PDF can open a PDF, and people ask, why should I keep it up to date? And there's so many security flaws found in Adobe PDF that it needs to be addressed. And yet again, similar to Zoom, why does Acrobat Reader have so many security flaws identified on it? Because everyone uses it. Similar, Microsoft Office, everyone uses it. So if you're writing an exploit and you're writing it for Office, you almost guaranteed that there will be people using outdated versions. And like we've discussed, Zoom. As long as you keep your Zoom up to date, you're honestly fine. It's not going to be a train smash. Configure your stuff correctly to the best of your ability, and you should be fine, actually. Then, very important in your home office environment, do not let your family use your work devices. And this is something I cannot say enough. I've seen so many times where home office devices is passed on to children, and they just quickly going onto YouTube, and they're just visiting a website. And unbeknownst to everyone, they unfortunately click on malware and it gets installed on the machine, and that's how companies do get compromised. No one willingly goes and installs malware on their devices. I have not heard of a single person that went out willingly, clicked on a file that they knew was going to format their machine and destroy it. There's no reason for people to do that, but these things happen. Another big problem is when your family uses your device, they might accidentally delete stuff. They're not intending to do it, but accidents do happen. Even a non-cybersecurity risk, people might spill water on the device and then you lose all your data. So there's many risks. Don't let your family use your home office devices. Then securing your home network. And this is probably the most technical thing I have in the slideshow, and I want to keep it as easy as possible. I'm not telling you to put up the best password. Password policies, there's a massive amount of discussion around what is a good password and what should you use and so forth. And people have asked me, how do I choose a password? And I've really told people, having complex passwords that you think of and trying to remember it, people tend to write it down. So rather use a sentence and use the first letter of the sentence. I mean, if you use a sentence that I have there, I really love to go out hiking in the afternoons after work. Just using the first letter, you easily create a 12-character password. It's not something, I mean, the 12 characters in a row is not something I'm ever going to remember. But the sentence is something, if you're passionate about hiking, you will always remember it. And then with regards to security, literally changing to WPA2 is a single click, single setting, and it'll be on the same screen as where you change your password when you set up the device. This is something almost everyone can do and is not a complex task. Then update the software on all your electronic devices in your household. And I've asked so many people to please bear in mind, your cell phone, your mobile device is another way into your home network or company network. If you're doing home office environment, keep your mobile phone updated. It's also an easy process. The applications prompt you to keep it updated. All you need to do is click yes or do it. The more complex things on this slide is keeping your washing machine, vacuum, lights, heating systems, all your home automation devices updated. However, counter argument to that is if you've configured your washing machine to be on your home network, you're also the type of person who kind of knows how to work with home automation devices, and it shouldn't be such a problem to configure it correctly. So all I ask you is just update it. Smart televisions, luckily we're at the point where smart TVs can enable auto updates. So it's something that is actually a benefit. But as IT people, any device connected to your home network can cause a security breach. Currently in the place I stay, we've got an automatic lawnmower, which is on the wireless network. That is very easily a physical device an attacker could physically connect to, because it's literally outside of my house. It's not locked inside. So make sure you know what your lawnmower can do on your network if compromised. These are things that people do not think about. And then, and this is something for all the managers or people or in charge of companies or CEOs or COOs, be open to your employees. Allow them to question and verify requests. Never talk down to your employees when they ask, is this a legitimate request? It is the #1 way to really alienate your workforce and letting them fall prey to cyber attacks. Reward people for disclosing issues in your company. Don't say it's always Francois that reports the problems or reports the security vulnerabilities in the environment. As soon as you do that, you immediately lose the employee, and the employee will just blindly start clicking on links if you ask them to do a request, because they are no longer open to talking to you about it. It's a psychological thing that people fear authoritative figures, because you might get fired from your job or something similar to that. So I honestly feel management should always encourage employees to verify requests that is outside of the normal business sense. So whenever I do security training in work environments, I always ask, and one of my rules is I will only do training for your organization if I can get all levels of staff in the same training room. And I'm talking about, I want everyone from the floor cleaner, secretary, up to upper management in the same venue. I'm not willing to give upper management one training set and the secretaries and cleaning staff a different set of training. Everyone needs to be in the same venue so that I can tell people, be open and ask and verify requests. I've seen so many times where people have transferred money to the wrong accounts because they were too afraid to verify requests. One prime example of this is people feel stupid for doing this and they don't report it. I worked on an incident response case where, and this is a company that branches all across the country. And what happened, the finance department paid the rental fee for one of the buildings into the wrong account because of a fraudulent invoice. The management then decided, geez, this is a problem. We will not report it. We won't tell our other branches about it. And exactly a week later, one of the other branches, the exact same thing happened. Could have all been avoided if it was communicated to everyone that be on the lookout. Fraudulent invoices are making rounds in the organization. Do not pay it. General security awareness is really important. And as long as there's a buy-in from the company as a whole, it is really good and easy to get a secure cyber culture in your environment. So at this point, what should you do now? Ask your employer, what are they doing against cybersecurity right now? How are we securing the home office? Employees are allowed to take laptops home. What is on the laptop to ensure that the person at home has a secure home network? It's something we don't know. Provide your employees with a set of guidelines. What is good cyber security behavior on the internet? So, like I said, people don't go click on malicious links because they want to. They click on it, malicious links, out of mistake or not knowing how to do it, or it happens. I've seen a lot of compromises in organizations happen because employees don't have access to the software. the license key is so difficult to find, or IT isn't readily available to install the software, and people just go on the internet and be like, Adobe Acrobat Reader Pro, where to find a cracked copy of it and install it. It is too often the case where if there was an open line of communication, that problems could have been addressed and solved. So what I can offer you guys is all my research is freely, publicly available. You can go to my ResearchGate profile. Everything can be downloaded there. I'm also involved in other projects. Anyone who wants to participate in any Capture the Flag events, I've actively participated in social engineering Capture the Flag events, open source intelligence Capture the Flag events, and missing person databases Capture the Flag events. So I also have got a bunch of cybersecurity content that I will freely provide to anyone who asks. And I'm also part of an open source intelligence initiative called Searchlight. If anyone wants more information on it, you're more than welcome to email me. The Zoom invite comes from my Norof email, so you can just email to there and you can get more information. Is there any questions, comments, or observations at this point in time on the talk? I've had some questions. The one question is, just going to click answer live. So, hi, what do you think of Zoom screenshots posted on social media showing people's faces? And the person says, usually without their written consent. This is a problem. And unfortunately, it's not something you can really control. I mean, all of you can do a print screen of this and include my face in the slides. There's no way for me to stop it. However, something that needs to be taken into account, what does your law state about it? So I know the South African law and what it is on there. All conversations may be recorded as long as one party agrees to the conversation, to the recording. So, and then you ask me, but that sounds very odd. So in South Africa, the law is you can record any conversation as long as one party, even if you are the party recording the conversation, agrees to the recording. So that basically means you can record anything. Any form of recording can be done. So my personal opinion, and this is what I do, is I would always ask permission from people when I post any content on them online, any photos and stuff. General security behavior is don't post people's photos online if you can help it. But we sit with the problem of social media, and people love sharing stuff on social media. Something that I tell people is Facebook check-ins is the absolute evil, because when I attend a concert or event, a public event, normally my group of friends would check in all of us at this event, and it would notify everyone on my Facebook feed that I am not at home at that point in time. The only way to get around it is to have really good settings on your security profile on Facebook, which is a difficult task because the settings change all the time and people are not sure how to change it. So to that, there's no solution to it. People will post stuff on social media. So be aware that people have the information, and I cannot give you an answer that will satisfy the question. People will be sharing stuff. The best you can do is ask them not to. Okay. I've got another question. I'll quickly read it. Hi, Francois. So fear invokes emotion. Individuals make bad decisions when emotionally unstable, hence easier to swear. Are the mass media hyping mass hysteria of COVID-19, hence social engineering at a grand scale? And for what purpose? Is mass media's hysteria a gold mine for social engineers worldwide? That loops back to the start of my presentation, where we are currently in a crisis. There's mass hysteria and people are doesn't know what's going on. People are in full-blown panic mode and we don't know how to deal with the situation. At this point in time, social engineering attacks is significantly more effective. A lot more people fall prey to the attacks and it works. I mean, a year or two ago, no Twitter employee got the entire Twitter platform hacked. There's too many events where social engineering is the cause at the moment, and it's just becoming a bigger and bigger problem on a daily basis. I've got another question here. One example of a threat I've seen lately is the USB ports on public places and such. How great of a threat are these, and what do you think we can expect to encounter in the nearest future? So, public USB ports. It's something that I do warn people about. Don't plug your mobile phones into airport charging ports. It is the easiest way for attackers to infect your mobile phones. It is not an easy way, but it is possible. All you can do to avoid it is just carry your charging plug with you. It also charges way faster than any airport USB plug will ever charge your phone at. So it's one additional item that you need to carry around. Alternatively, if you're carrying a laptop, charge your mobile phone from your laptop at that point in time. Don't plug in your mobile phone to open charging ports. In Norway, all of our buses have charging ports on it. I've had some investigation into it, and to bypass that and put in malicious content in the back of it is really easy. Norway being a trusting nation, people will plug in their USBs into it and charge their phones on there. And I can only say, please don't do it. Something that I want to add is on USB flash drives, that is important for you guys to note. Don't pick up USB flash drives. Doesn't matter if you're trying to be a good Samaritan and return it to the person. There's two scenarios: is either you pick it up and you want to steal it, so you plug it into your machine to see how big it is, to see how big of a steal you got, or alternatively you pick it up and you plug it in to see whose it is so that you can return it. In both of these cases, you acted wrongly by plugging it into your machine, and it can infect your machine. So if you want to go out tomorrow and breed awareness on this, what I tell people is think about USB flash drives as packet of chips or crisps or potetgull, as they would call it in Norway, potato chips. Would you ever get off a bus or a train and pick up a packet of potato chips and continue eating it? There is no one in chat that would do that. Absolutely no one. Why do we do the same with USB flash drives? It's such a shocking thing. So the next time you see a USB flash drive on the floor and you want to return it, think about it. Are you going to pick up a bag of potato chips, taste it, see whose it is, and try to return it? You won't. So don't do that. Leave the flash drive there. The person who lost it might come back and pick it up there. Then I've got another question. Don't you think having webinars is a huge security risk in itself? It would just be to rip off a stream and make a deepfake that would look highly realistic. It's a difficult question. Deepfakes are becoming a bigger and bigger problem. It is a problem we have not solved yet. Very luckily, all my webinars has associated slide decks, and I publish them myself publicly afterwards so people can go back and review and revisit them. So yes, there can be a deepfake made on it, but it's going to be a massive task to change what I say to no longer match up with my slides. So it is a risk. We haven't solved deepfakes, but I don't really have an answer on how to fix it now. At this point in time, deepfakes is a bigger problem in political agendas or government officials talking and changing what they've said. Another question is how to train people to learn to spot phishing. Do you believe in performing phishing tests? This is something also that's very dear to me, is when you do a phishing assessment on your organization, I believe in doing phishing tests across the organization and making people aware about phishing in the organization. What you do is you send out phishing emails, very obvious phishing emails. Let people do it. As soon as they click on it, immediately you must reroute back to a training page. However, when you do phishing assessments in your organization, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong, provide training company-wide. Don't identify anyone who clicked on the links and fell prey to the attacks. People who did fall prey to the attacks will value the education that is provided to the organization as a whole, and they will actually become better employees than the people who did not fall prey to the attacks. So it's almost a sense of reward the people who actually fall prey to the attacks, because they would notice in themselves they fall prey to it, and they would really appreciate having training on it. I've got another question on LinkedIn profile for cybersecurity professionals. And this can go both ways. How do you find a job in society these days? LinkedIn is the way to go. I know there's a lot of people who are very against LinkedIn profiles, very against Facebook, very against social media, Twitter, all of these platforms. A lot of people feel their phones are tracking them daily and they should turn that off. I'm on the total opposite part of the coin. I personally feel you will be tracked. Even if you try your best to defend against being tracked, you cannot get away from it. I've seen more benefit in enabling all possible tracking services on myself than I've seen it hindering my life or making me an easier target. I'm on the other side of the coin as well, being a researcher, that you can almost find anything about me online. Up to my personal cell phone number is published online publicly. Personal email is on every single of my research papers. I'd rather prefer people contact me. You need engagement. It comes back to the whole social society. I cannot have an impact in the cybersecurity field if I just live in a hole and I don't talk to people about it. So in that sense, having a LinkedIn profile as a cybersecurity professional, I would say do it. Just apply it correctly. Do constant posts on awareness. Do constant posts on how people can protect themselves. It's something that will always work. So have these pages. Educate society when you do. That is all the questions. Is there any other person who has a question they want to ask? Any questions? We've got 20 more minutes that we can dedicate to questions. Another question is, do you think it's a better idea to use the first letter of sentences instead of the entire sentence when making passwords? It is almost better to use the first letter, because a lot of password platforms where you enter passwords limit you on the amount of characters. I'm very against these password platforms that limit the amount of characters, but unfortunately we live in a society where passwords are typically capped out at 40 characters. It's also easier on your mobile device to type in a password that is 12 characters instead of 40. We are moving towards quantum computing where longer passwords can be cracked, but I mean, you can always just increase your sentence length at that stage. So I almost very vividly advocate against really, really long and really, really complex passwords, because people do forget them. Rather have a couple of really good passwords and use them, use a sentence technique. So, or even better is use a password manager and then use a really strong password for your password manager. However, as soon as I start talking about password managers, I move into the realm where the talk becomes too technical for the general public. Password managers on mobile phones, it just becomes a pain and a nightmare, and people struggle to use it. That's why the techniques that I advocate is techniques that everyone can apply, as using the sentence. The other question I had is, what about a password manager? And that's 100%. It's a really good technique, but it's a technique that is unfortunately too complex for the general public to understand. I mean, if I told my parents to use password managers, they will ask me, what is this? Why do they have to pay for it? It makes no sense in their life. But they can easily remember a sentence and just use the first character of the sentence. Davina, Leonardo, Rosanna, do you have anything to add?
Hi, hello, hi. No, thanks very much. I think it was fascinating content, and I think the Q&As, the questions were also great. Thank you very much for sending those questions through. In fact, yeah, I learned also a lot during this session, and there is a new one that has come through, by the way, Francois.
All right. So the next question is, what kind of threats do you think we'll experience as computing is evolving, besides the ones you mentioned? So I'm not really the best person to predict things, because as soon as you start predicting things, it becomes like a dystopian future, and people will always quote you for being wrong. But what kind of threats do we think? I honestly think within the next couple of years, passwords is going to be absolutely obsolete. I think the next best invention that we'll find is a different way to authenticate to systems. I have no idea how we do it. I think the person that invents the way to authenticate to systems on a reliable way will become an absolute multimillionaire. I have thought of many solutions on how to do it, but to date, I don't have a solution on that. Like I mentioned, deepfakes are going to become a problem. I have no idea how we protect against that. We're moving into a realm where we get chatbots that can automate social engineering attacks and automate calls. That will become a problem. We're also going to have a problem where your denial of service attacks is going to become slightly different, where we currently have Google bots that can make hair appointments or make restaurant reservations for you. There's nothing stopping you from doing a denial of service against a restaurant, but just calling in, and you can have an automated bot that just calls in and books up the entire restaurant. So it's a very different denial of service, but it still falls into the realm of denial of service because you're wasting people's time at that point of time. The attack platform is just going to become bigger, broader. My personal worry is we're moving into the realm, and we've almost reached it, where everyone has a device that's connected to the internet. I've seen photos, especially of my students, when they say, sorry, they can't do work because the children are at home, and then they send me a photo of all 4 or 5 children on their iPads. Children who are between the ages of 5 or 10, they can't determine what is a malicious link and what is not. I mean, adults that's between the ages of 20 to 80 cannot do this. How is a child of age 7 going to determine, is this application malicious or not? So how are we going to protect our children against cybersecurity threats? Cyberbullying is becoming something that's becoming a massive problem. Every other person out there has a mobile phone that has a really good camera on it. I don't know how we're going to solve it. Awareness is the only way to solve it. Unfortunately, schoolyard bullying has gone to the realm of on the internet, and bullying has been around since the start of time, and there's no way to solve it. So it's at that problem, I don't know what to do about that. I also get a question quite often from parents. What can they do to protect their children from online predators? And there's two schools of thought. You can either 100% monitor everything they do on the internet, monitor all traffic, see exactly which websites they visit. And to that thing, I'm quite against that thing. The reason for that is you immediately break all trust that you have with your child, and they're all going to start hiding things from you. There is not a single person here that can tell me they've never hid stuff from their parents, and children are absolute masters at this. So if you're monitoring everything your child does online, they will find a way around it. So what I advocate is rather continuous discussions with a child on what to do, what not to do, and to almost hand over the responsibility to the child and continuously engage with them about what the issues are and what the consequences might be. So, like I said, I'm very against full-on monitoring. Some form of monitoring might be good, as long as you are open to your child about what you are monitoring and why you are doing it, and you're doing it for the better of them. Actively blocking websites is not going to solve the problem. Don't even try to do that to your child. That they will find ways around it. So I think that's it. Any other questions, you are more than welcome to email me. I will try to respond to them as soon as possible. If you have any questions about research that I've done or want to form part of any of the initiatives I'm running, please reach out and contact me. I also want to thank John for advertising this webinar for me, and thank you for setting us up and writing the really good blog article with me. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to hand over to Rosanna to just close it out.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francois. It's been really enlightening, and the questions have been also fantastic. And I've learned both from your presentation as well as the questions. And it's a closing remark should be that cybersecurity, it's everybody's concern. It's that's why the human element is so strong and it's so intertwined with the technical one. And so we all should be, aware and just stop, think, and be before we click on any links or open any attachments. And that's one of the things that is coming across in all the content that I'm being able to read these days. So thank you very much to North University as well for organizing the Zoom webinar, because obviously thanks to you we've been able to do that. So I just want to let all the participants know that we'll be producing a lot more content in the weeks to come, focusing on various aspects of cybersecurity. So just keep an eye on our Twitter, and keep an eye on the communications that come through Giant on variety of levels, various levels. Thank you so much, everybody.